in progress. We are live for episode 3 of the Cop Cave. We have a great one here today. I'm really excited to get this story talked about because this is like one of the more interesting, that's not even a word, but we're going to go with it, parts of your career.
Okay.
The negotiator.
Right.
So for those of you that have been tuning in with us, I would just want to give a round of applause to myself. We are officially off the ground, people. We started like on a little cardboard box, upgraded to the bed, and now we have a table. We have an official background now. So we're making moves and trying to make this a better podcast with every episode. Dad, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Doing well today.
Nice. Great to hear. Glad to have you as always. Let's get right into it. Don't want to waste any time. As some people may or may not know, you were a crisis negotiator for the West Palm Beach Police Department. How did you get that position? Like, what led up to that, and what did your job title entail?
Well, getting that position, it was a specialty unit, and I applied for that specialty unit because I thought I had the demeanor to help under those crisis situations, being calm and being able to talk to people even when they're in a high stress situation. So I put in for that. Man, more than 20 years, 20 plus years, I was on the team and did several negotiations of crisis interventions. And that was just part of it. So you have to be able to be calm and be able to think under pressure, be able to handle the situation well enough that you don't cause it to get worse. That's the biggest thing there. So you want, when somebody's in crisis, to help them to overcome the crisis in the safest way possible.
Got you. Was that something going into becoming a police officer? Was that something you had in mind to do, or how did you even become like interested in talking people off the ledge, for lack of a better phrase?
Yeah. No, prior to getting into law enforcement, I hadn't thought about that as being something that was a skill of mine. But after being in it for a few years and seeing how how my demeanor helped the situation get smoother and calmer, I thought it was something that would be beneficial for me, and it was a part of a career path to help me be a better investigator and all that. So that was part of it as well.
Got you. And like, how far into your police career when you started this? Like, how long have you been with the department?
I think it was shortly after I made detective. So I think I had been on like 8 or 9 years. So it was shortly after I made detective.
That's really cool. Because in my mind, when I hear hostage negotiator, I think of the movie with Samuel Jackson, I believe it was, with the suit and everything, just going in like, you got to give us the hostages, Johnny. What do you need? Not like negotiating with them by giving them what they want, but trying to diffuse the situation. So did you have like a particular approach to different scenarios?
Well, as any negotiator will tell you, your first thing you should do is ask the person to give up. Okay? You want to get the situation over as quickly as possible. You want them to know that that's the end goal, for them to come out if there's actually holding hostages or taking hostages. But every situation is going to be different because every crisis situation is different, especially if they do actually have a hostage. What they may want, the reason they took the hostage, is going to vary from case to case. So you have to try to build a rapport with them as quickly as possible and find out if they have any demands. You got to find out what are the hooks for them, things that make them want to cooperate with you. And also you need to know what are the triggers, things that's going to make them blow up. So you want to avoid all the triggers as much as possible. But every situation is going to be different. And it could be something as simple as giving them food, something as simple as just listening to them. And that could be what they need or what they want at that time to allow them to feel like, okay, they've done what they had to do, they made their point, and now they can end the situation in a positive way.
Got you. Because you want to find some type of compromise to where everybody gets out of the situation safely. That's the ultimate goal, and you kind of just build that conversation and build that relationship with whoever the hostage is, or what would that person even be called? Like the hostage holder or
hostage taker?
Hostage taker.
Yeah, if there's an actual hostage, yeah, hostage taker. But like I said, we're a crisis negotiation unit. So it could be a barricaded subject, a person in crisis. That's when our unit will get called out. But so traditionally, it's called a hostage negotiation team. But for today's climate, it's crisis intervention. So that's where the negotiators come in. Whenever there's a crisis situation, whether it's a hostage or not, But that's what they do.
Got you. And with today's story, we want to focus on a man that kind of took himself hostage in a unusual turn of events. This story starts back in, I believe, 2015, with a young man out of Boca Raton, Florida, which is still Palm Beach County, but not technically West Palm's jurisdiction. From what I understand, this man was beefing with the mother of his child and her current boyfriend. They had been arguing, going back and forth. He attacked both of them and then fled to West Palm, which is where your team got involved. So, when did you get this call, and at what point in the action were we when you started going out to the scene?
Well, on this particular case, like you said, the incident happened in Boca Raton, which is about 20 miles south of us. And the suspect came back to the West Palm area, actually ended up on the town island of Palm Beach, town of Palm Beach, where they located his cell phone. They pinged the cell phone. That's where they knew where he was. And that agency tried to make contact with him. That's when he threatened to hurt himself and got into the water. So I was actually off work that day. I wasn't working. So they called me in to help with the negotiation. They already had a couple of our other negotiators on the scene that were there before me, and I was brought in to help finish the situation. So that's what brought me to the scene. And it was unusual in the sense that where it happened, where they're on the beach in the town of Palm Beach, which you know is a pretty affluent area.
Right. That's where Mar-a-Lago is.
Yeah, that's where Mar-a-Lago is. That's where a lot of billionaires live. However, in this particular case, it was made unusual. Typically, when you have a crisis negotiation or a barricaded subject, the media gets involved, and usually it's we try to keep it quiet to the point where it's not affecting everybody in the area. But as I got there, they had been on scene a couple of hours already before I got there. As I'm driving to the scene, I had to park like a half mile away because there was so much traffic where people were parked on the street, these little streets over in Palm Beach, that I couldn't get close enough to the scene. So I had to park about a half a mile away, walk to the scene, and I see all these people out there, the media helicopters above, and I mean, probably maybe 100 or so people. That's a lot. Wow. That were like spectators.
So literally, prior to you get into this kind of circus situation, what did you know about the suspect in question? Because he didn't have a hostage. He was a barricaded subject because he had fled Boca Raton and ended up on Palm Beach Island, just walked out to the water. Did you know like what he was involved with before that?
Yeah, I knew it was a stabbing where he stabbed two people and they were in critical condition at the time. So I knew it was a serious thing, and obviously the agency needed to arrest him.
At that point, did you know the motive, like what the dispute was?
Not on my way getting there, no. But once I got there and was briefed by the other officers, then I found out how they got involved.
Okay. So you make your way through the crowd of nosy Palm Beach folks. How do you make contact with the man?
Okay, so as I'm going through the crowd, and what made it interesting is that people literally were sitting there, beach chairs along the road and on the beach with buckets of popcorn and sitting there watching like it's a show.
Right.
So I'm like, this is unusual. We don't usually get that in our crisis intervention thing where people out there just watching, especially with the helicopters and such going on. But I made contact first with the supervisor on the scene for our unit, and the supervisor briefed me on what had occurred and what they knew at the time, that the man had gone down to Boca to his the mother of his child,
the baby mom.
Yeah, and went into the apartment or the house, but the door was unlocked. He walked in, and from what they knew, an encounter happened because the woman was in there with another man. Okay, that made him upset, go off or whatever. He gets a knife and he commits to stabbing the both of them. Okay, and then he runs out of the apartment and he gets in his car and heads back to West Palm and ends up on Palm Beach Island. So that's the information I'm given. And while I'm getting this information, one of our other negotiators is trying to talk to the man on the beach. Now, the beach. They were probably about 30 feet apart. He's in the water, like knee-deep water,
Mhm.
and the officers on the beach about 30 feet away. So they did have uniform officers to provide lethal cover for him.
And I think this was, like, in March, like, early in the beginning of the year, so it's Florida, but that water's pretty
Yeah,
cold.
yeah, the water's cold. It was a cooler day, probably in the 50s, which is cool for here. and and he was in the water. And like I said, by the time I got there, they had been talking to him for like an hour, maybe two.
Mm,
Okay, so he had been in the water for quite a bit of time.
right.
But like I said, standing in knee deep water, and he had a knife to his chest. Okay, and what we thought was the knife that he committed the stabbing to.
The attack.
Okay, so the first negotiator had started the negotiation and actually lost his voice. He got hoarse because of the distance. So that's why he couldn't talk anymore. So the second negotiator was trying, and then but he wasn't establishing a good enough rapport, I would say, but he wasn't getting much success. So
Right.
I'm the third negotiator to come on the scene, and I started to try to talk to the young man and try to get him to come out of the water. And again, the first thing you do is ask him, let's get this over with, put it down, let's come on and let's make sure this thing ends in a positive manner.
Now, I'm
Okay.
curious, because you're trying to establish that relationship, do you remember, like, the approach you used, or did you just say, like, "Hey, man, let's bring it home, it's cold." Do you know, like, what your first, sentence was?
First, I typically introduce myself, and I let them know that you know they are the primary concern.
Mhm,
Their health and safety is our concern, and that's why we're here. If we didn't care anything about you, we wouldn't be here trying to talk to you.
right,
So that's the first thing we let them know. But we are concerned. We want you to be safe. Okay. Despite what happened, that to me at this point is somewhat irrelevant. But your safety is paramount. So that's what that's the approach I always take. Let the person know that their safety is the utmost thing, and I'm willing to do whatever I can to make sure they stay safe.
mhm,
And that's how we started, and that's the continuing theme in this.
gotcha,
So once I started talking to him, and he's telling me about what happened, and he actually worked for a lawyer. So to tell him he wasn't going to go to jail. You may see that in a movie sometimes. They'll tell you, oh no, if you come with me and we'll talk to the state attorney, you won't go to jail. That kind of stuff, that BS wasn't going to work.
right,
Okay, because I mean, he knew he had committed a crime and he knew that he was going to go to jail. He was a paralegal. So my approach was then just think about your son. Even if you go to jail, as somebody who works for a lawyer, that just because a person's arrested, they don't go to prison. You
right,
may be found not guilty. Certain things could happen. So that was the approach I was taking. Think about your future. You're young. You got a young child. That child needs to have you in his life. And so the best way that can happen is you put down a knife, come on out of the water. We can get you to the point where you can see your son again.
mhm,
If you don't come out of the water, if you do something extreme, you won't ever see him again. He'll grow up without a father. So that was the main thing I kept harping on. You
right,
have some kind of future. Even if you go to prison, you can get out. Okay. And you can have a life beyond being in prison. You can still have a relationship with your child. And that's the approach I kept harping on. And this conversation kept going. And I mean, we talked about other stuff too. But at least 2 hours I was talking to him.
wow. Do you have a megaphone, or are you just yelling?
We just talking, speaking loudly, no megaphone. Yeah, the media would have loved that because they could hear everything. So
Right,
that was one good thing. People were further enough the back that they couldn't hear what we were saying, but they could definitely see all the stuff that was going on as far as him being in the water. And and at a point, I think I got a little closer, maybe 20 feet away from him. He's still in knee deep water, and I could see behind him there was a little shark, like about a 3 foot shark swimming behind him, and
mm,
he's got a knife to his chest.
mhm.
And other officers saw it too, and they were thinking, should we tell him? Like, no, we don't want him to panic this morning.
I mean, that
We
might
don't
have
want.
gotten him out the water pretty quick.
Yeah, but then he's coming out of the water with a knife in his hand toward
Right.
police officers. That's not a good decision either.
Yeah.
So I made the decision to not mention the shark. I mean, it was a smaller shark, maybe like I said, about 3 foot. It wouldn't have killed him. Okay. But I didn't want him to panic, or I didn't want him to think I was BSing him by saying, "Hey man, there's a shark behind you, might come out." So that might be a ploy somebody might try to do, and then
Right.
now you're insulting their intelligence. Okay,
Right.
so my thinking was, now just ignore it, just keep going on the vein that I was going with. Think about your future, think about your son. Yeah, you're gonna go to jail today, but you can get out, you can beat the charge. You may not go to prison, so you still have a life. And so those are the things you got to harp on. Find as much positive as you can under these circumstances.
Mm.
Because he didn't know if the people were dead or not. And actually, I didn't know either. I just know that, hey, they called me here to get you out of the war. Okay, that's what I'm
So
here for.
how much time were you out there in the water? Because that takes up a lot of time. Like that drive from Boca to West Palm, that's like a good 20 to 30 minutes. He was probably booking it, so he got there sooner. And then by the time you had already gotten to the water, he's like what, 2 hours deep. So add another 2 hours. We're getting in the later part of the afternoon. How long was that whole situation going on before you came to some resolution?
Yeah, yeah, he had to be in the water at least 4 hours.
Wow.
At least 4 hours in the water, because I was talking to him for 2 hours, maybe a little more. And I think the other officers, the first ones to approach him, they didn't want to make him go into the water, and then they called the rest of us, and you know, and the prior negotiators were talking to him for at least an hour and a half, another 2 hours. So he had been in that water for a minimum of 4 hours.
Mhm. So you
So
guys are all pruned up, the saltiness is probably stinging your cheeks or whatever. And then how do we get him on dry land? Because there's a good picture that I'm gonna use. It's like kind of the thumbnail of you and a couple of other officers walking him out of the water. He has like the trauma thing on. Yeah, I think he is
well,
at that time.
actually, we gave him that blanket. Uh, I got close enough to him where I was able to throw him a blanket because he was complaining that he was getting cold.
Right.
And I was saying, well, I can get you a blanket to warm you up, but it'd be even better if you come on out. But he said he wasn't ready to come out, so I gave him that little plastic blanket so he could have some warmth, and that helped us get a little bit closer. Uh, he and I, so we could have more of a conversation. That's when I got close enough to talk to him without having to yell. And the other officers were back a little bit further because he was concerned about that the uniform officers were close enough. He thought they were going to try to bum rush him and get him, or they were just shooting. So
Mhm.
those were his concerns. So I helped to alleviate those concerns, gave him the blanket so he could be warmer. We talked more, talked about his son. That was a big hook because he really wanted to have a relationship with his son. He really wanted to be in the son's life. And the way to do that is to come out, let's face these charges, see what the best outcome you can get out of it. You work for lawyers, so you might have a good
Get
chance
some-
of getting somebody that can help you at least eliminate, or not eliminate, but lessen the charges. So that was my approach.
Mhm.
Find a positive. Find a way to make you think about your future. Think about your child. Think about life beyond what happened today. Because there's going to be a tomorrow, and it can be better. It can be better. And so that's what I kept harping on and stressing on. You can make this situation better. And the best way to do it is to put the knife down, come on out, let's go and deal with it.
Mhm.
And eventually, he just kind of was listening to me, put his head down, and he said, he just one time he said, all right. And he walked closer to me, and I said, hey, you got to put the knife down. So once he got out of the water, I had to put the knife down. I got close enough to him and put the handcuffs on him. And then that's the picture you see with us walking him out. And that was the local newspaper took that picture and posted it.
Yeah. That's really one thing that goes into negotiation, patience. You really have to be patient and put in the time to build that relationship, develop that trust so they don't feel as like you're trying to get one over for them. I was watching that Denzel movie with the trains, which one what was that? Pelham 123 with
Yeah,
the guy from Greece, John Travolta.
yeah, Pelham 123, yeah.
Yeah, and things really went left when John Travolta's character felt like they were trying to get one over for him. They switched the original Denzel's character for another negotiator who would have been doing the same thing as you were, and it just wasn't that rapport, and ended up some people losing their lives. But that's
Yeah.
fiction. This is real. It's a whole nother thing when you're out there up to your ankles in cold, salty water with a bunch of people just watching you with the binoculars trying to figure out
Yeah.
what's going on, and there's a shark also being nosy trying to nip at your heels, man. There's a lot of factors in play that you got to like keep in control, keep everything calm and just focus on, like you said, getting everybody home safely and living to fight another day.
Yeah, and like I was saying to him, I mean, I can understand him being upset because from what I understand, he talked to the girlfriend prior on the phone, and they had an argument, um, something about the child's daycare, something like that, and he didn't like the way the conversation ended, so he left work in West Palm and drove down to Boca to see what was going on with her, and that's when he walked into the house and found her with another man. Okay, and that really upset him.
Set them off.
Set him off to the point where he got a knife and went to commence the cutting on both of those people. And unfortunately, the man died. So it ended up being a homicide.
Yeah.
But the young lady did survive. And those are kind of situations that happen when we can't control our emotions in a good way. But being a negotiator in this particular case, just trying to stay calm, trying to remind him of his future and of the positive outcome that he could make happen by getting out of that water and going on with your life, dealing with these charges, and having a chance to see your child and be a part of your child's life. So that's what I really, really harped on, and it worked. And eventually, I think the cold weather helped too.
Yeah, definitely impact.
But eventually, he was like, you know what? Yeah, let me go and get out of this water and just go ahead and face it.
Exactly. Was there because one way that I've found in my life just to kind of bridge that connection is like humor, everybody kind of relaxes a little bit when they laugh. So did you have any jokes that you tried out there or anything that didn't go over so well, maybe?
I don't recall in this particular case, but yeah, that can be very touchy in a crisis situation because you got to really feel that person out and understand their sense of humor because it can work to your advantage. But if you if you hit the wrong button with the humor, that can go really bad really quick.
Right.
Okay, so I mean, in your training as a negotiator, you use whatever is available to you. And if you feel you have a good enough rapport and you understand that person's sense of humor, like if they're cracking particular kind of jokes, then maybe that might give you a little segue to do the same. But it's not wise to start off with a joke in a crisis situation because it may not go well. It may not go well. Now, humor works well in other social situations. It can break the ice. Yeah, I agree with you on that. But in a crisis situation, you got to really know the person, the people you're dealing with in order to make that joke be effective.
You can't just walk out there, knock, knock. Let's get this guy off the beach. But yeah, that's definitely one story that was very interesting. Just being called out on your day off. I think he was probably doing like yard work or something. They're like, hey, come on out to the beach. We need to get this guy. So very compelling story. I want to keep this a nice, tight episode of the Cop Cave. And then next week, we're going to get into some more interesting shenanigans. And later on in the future, we will have some of your colleagues from incidents like this on the show. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But
yeah, there are some people that I know that that have some stories, let's put it that way. And they are compelling in the way that they tell them. So, but yeah, there's some things that we can add to this. And I'm looking forward to doing more.
For sure. And for anybody watching, if you have any questions, comment them, hit me up. I'm very easy to reach. Reach out to Dad. Anything that you want answered, we're going to get into that some more. But thank you for tuning in to episode 3 of the Cop Cave. Thank you, Dad, for your stories, and we will talk to y'all next time.
Peace.